There was this couple who lived in a community that was overrun with rabbits. I think maybe some people had released their bunnies because they didn't want to take care of them anymore, and bunnies breed. And so this community was really overrun with rabbits. But there was what do you call that? There was a whole group of bunnies that lived underneath their porch and their back patio, and they didn't want to keep contributing to the bunny problem. So they were trying to figure out how they could, cut down on the bunnies living under their patio. And there were some things they didn't want to do. They didn't want to hurt any bunnies. They didn't want to, but they really wanted. So they went out and they got one of those two of those live capture cages, right? Traps, right? The bunny sees food, goes in, trap slams shut, bunny eats. No predators are going to get bunny. It's safe. And then the next morning, somebody would come out and see if they had caught a bunny, and if they had, they would take it to bunny heaven, which was not death. It was this big field on the outskirts of town, which had kind of been designated by everybody as the place they wished the bunnies would go. Anyway, so this couple, they got some traps, they put them under, and he would go out and check them every morning or every other morning or whatever. And one morning he got up, and as he was sipping his coffee, he thought to himself, I wonder if we caught a bunny, right? So he goes outside, and he looks under the patio, under the deck, and they sure caught something. They caught a black and white something. And it wasn't a bunny. They had caught a skunk. So I'm not going to tell you what they did with the skunk, because I don't know. I imagine they called an animal person to come and take care of it. But the point of the story, and why I'm telling this to you this morning, is because the catching of the skunk was an unintended consequence. And the law of unintended consequences, there is the law of unintended consequences. Never knew that. The law of unintended consequences say every undertaking, no matter how well-intentioned, is generally accompanied by unforeseen problems that can overshadow the original effort. So, no matter how good our intentions, it can all go sideways. Or there may be other terms that go through your head, and that's okay, because it's the same. It just doesn't work out the way you expect it to. Now, we've been talking the last 3 weeks about debt, and kind of looking at some scriptures to allow ourselves to kind of wrestle with debt and the reasons for debt and how it fits in. And we have not taken if you have debt, you're wrong and bad. We have taken if you have debt, you're probably human, like the rest of us. And why does God care about our debt? And how does it impact us? So I'm going to come back to that. But in terms of the law of unintended consequences, I want you to imagine for a minute that you're a homeowner. And you and your spouse, if you have one, you and your partner, decide together, you've got some kids, 2, 3 kids, and they've got lots of friends, right? And you've tried to keep an eye on your kids and keep them close to home and take care of them, right? So you decide that the best thing to do would be to build an addition on the house, right? To build a family room. Whether you're renovating the basement or adding on, doesn't matter. And you don't have that money in your pockets. So you go to the bank, and the bank gives you a line of credit so that you can do this work. And the payments are reasonable, and you try to keep the costs down, but of course they rise. But eventually the space is done, and the idea is that you'll have a place where you can spend more time with your family. You have a place where your children and their friends can gather, where it's safe, and hopefully there's some presence there to keep them going in a good direction, right? But they're safe. So there's all these good reasons why you wanted to build this and why you took on the debt. Then the car dies. Well, you're doing okay with the payments. You can manage the payments. So far, it's been all right. But now the car's dead, and you need a car. And so you go to the bank, and the bank gives you a loan for a car. And suddenly, the level of your debt has gone up. And there begins to be tension in the household as you try to figure out what you're going to stop paying so you can pay the bills. What you're going to stop doing so you can pay the bills. And there starts to be stress between the partners and stress with the kids. And and it just gets to be so much, and eventually somebody gets a second job, or maybe both partners get a second job, just to manage the payments, right? These are unintended consequences, right? Unintended consequences. When we get into debt, when we sign on the dotted line, so to speak, we do it for really good reasons, right? We do it because it's something we feel like we need. Maybe it's a house, maybe it's a car, maybe it's an upgraded phone, maybe it's an upgraded computer. I don't know, but we all have things, right? Maybe it's dinner out because everybody's tired and nobody wants to cook. I don't know. But when we go into debt, we do for good reasons. We use our cards. Out they come. I do it, right? The problem is, we may have the very best of intentions. I've always had the very best of intentions. But there are unintended consequences, right? Stress. Sleepless nights, relationship issues with the family, hard questions, fighting, feelings of hopelessness, feelings of being trapped, feeling like there is absolutely no way that I have what it takes to manage this any longer. Sometimes divorce, or breakups, and sometimes suicide. The unintended consequences of debt are enormous in our country. Do you know that as of 2019, in Canada alone, we carried over $100 billion in credit card debt? And it has consequences. So, what's the good news? Could we get to some good news? And why are you talking about money in church? We don't do that, right? Bear with me, we're getting there. There can also be unintended blessings for the choices we make. If we were to make getting out of debt a priority, and that is, my friends, not my area of expertise, but there are some great programs out there. If this series of sermons has made you wonder about your financial abilities, there's Joseph Sangl, who has a book and a company called I Was Broke, But Now I'm Not. And of course, there's Dave Ramsey, right, who is very famous, but there's lots of places. So, as people begin to make the effort to get out of debt, as they get out of debt, we find that the unintended blessings of that are pretty much the opposite, right? More options for our lives. We don't feel stuck. We can do more of what we want. We can enjoy things without the stress. We can go on vacation without wondering how the heck we're going to pay that bill at the end when we get home. We can have a sense of accomplishment. We can find some freedom. We can communicate better around money with our partners, because money and sex are the two greatest reasons of divorce or breakups. Did you know that? And we're not going to talk about sex today. But money, right? It's a whole nother sermon series. So let me just kind of bring, for those of you who I know you haven't been here for the last little while, let me bring you up to speed. The first week, we talked about the fact that the borrower is slave to the lender, which is pretty incredible words, but it's in the book of Proverbs. It's a long time that this has been happening in human history. That whoever borrows money, the person they borrow it from, holds all the cards. Really, don't they? So that was the first one. The second week we talked about, in God we have everything we need. Now that is not like, because we believe in God, we can sit in the house and God's going to throw blessings into our lives. It's not how it works, right? The passage that we looked at was in 2 Peter, and it was about how through Jesus and through relationship to God through Jesus, or to Jesus, we have everything we need to live and to be godly, or to be close to God, or to be doing things in a different way. And so we talked about in God we have everything we need. Then last week we talked about debt's kryptonite. So just let me make sure, does everybody here know who Superman is? Show of hands. Especially, okay, good, everybody knows? Okay, so we know that kryptonite is the substance that when it comes into the area where Superman is, it cripples him, right? Takes away all his powers and all that stuff. And so last week we found out that debt has a kryptonite. And the kryptonite for debt is contentment. It's learning to remind ourselves that we have everything we need, that we're not missing out, that we're doing okay. And I'll tell you what. Now, I want to be honest. For those of you who are visiting, I heard this sermon series from another preacher online a while ago. And when I heard his sermon on the borrower is slave of the lender, and that debt is slavery, it really made me sit up and take notice. Because you know what? When I stopped and thought about it, I thought, you're right. It feels like slavery. When I can't figure out how I can make a payment that's bigger than the interest. It feels like slavery, right? So then, when I heard that contentment was debt's kryptonite, I felt a sense of relief. And so I have been practicing the saying, I'm not missing out, or I have everything I need. You know what? It works in the McDonald's drive-thru too, right? It works in the shoe store. It works, like, there are places I don't go, but I suspect it would work there too. This idea that I have everything I need. I already have everything I need. I have to wrestle with that. What does that mean? What do I need? And so that's where we are. And then today we have a new idea. And so I'm going to bring in, we're going to look at Acts 20. And this is, in all this, I have given you an example that by such work we must support the weak, remembering the words of the Lord Jesus, for he himself said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. So that's today's idea. right? Giving is better than getting. What? I like to give. Like, I like Christmas, and I like my birthdays. I like to get things. Okay, so I want you to imagine the best Christmas you've ever experienced, right? Just imagine it. And everybody's happy and paper's being ripped off of parcels and whatever. Giving is better than that. That's the message here. There is nothing wrong with giving. We all like to get stuff. But giving is better. It changes something inside us when we give to a cause or people who we know that we're actually genuinely helping and making a difference to. We feel bigger inside. We feel connected to the world in a different way. So there's another one we're going to look at from Matthew 6. And this is one of the scriptures that's brought out to shame people for having money. And so let me just reaffirm, we're not shaming anybody for having money or not having money, right? This one says, do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consumes, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, I just want you to notice, we have this idea in our society that where my money is, or where my heart is, my money will go, right? But actually, one of the truths that's being offered to us here is where your treasure is, there your heart will be. Right? So think of the thing you have that cost you the most money, that you have to put money into all the time. Might be your house, might be your car, might be your computer, might be your kids, right? Where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. So when you give to people in need, when you give to God, when you do good things, your heart follows. And you'll have more of that connection to God, connection to others, that sense of goodness. Now, bringing it back around to the whole debt thing. The idea of paring down my debt and getting out of debt is freaking overwhelming to me. Right? But then I go online and I watch the Dave Ramsey out of debt scream videos where people come in and share how they got out of debt and they get to scream, "We're out of debt!" And I think, ooh, I'd like to do that. It doesn't even need to be on Dave Ramsey, because, But, so, the thing is, when we get out of debt, we can give more. We can give more to people that need it. Today we heard the story of the Good Samaritan, right? That's a well-known story. I'm not going to tell the whole story. But in the story, there's this verse that I, quite frankly, had never stopped and paid much attention to, and that is the verse from Luke 10:35. Do you have one? Yes. So the next day, that would be the Good Samaritan, the one that has picked this guy up off the road and taken him to an inn and taken care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii, fairly significant sum of money, and gave them to the innkeeper and said, "Take care of him, and when I come back, I will repay you whatever more you spend." If the Samaritan hadn't had money, he wouldn't have been able to help that guy. And yeah, it's a parable. But the truth is, when you look at the people out there who are being helped or who are helping, it's done when we set a priority to help and when we have the resources to help. It's much easier to care for people, to actually give them assistance that matters when you have money. And if I get out of debt, I'll have more money to help. And there are some people who I've heard about. Well, the preacher had some people in his congregation who had done the work to get out of debt. And the one guy said to him, you know, the best thing about getting out of debt is that we can help more people. 1 Timothy 6:17 and 19. As for those who are in the present age are rich, command them not to be haughty. It doesn't say command them not to be rich. It says command them not to be haughty or to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but rather on God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, thus storing up for themselves the treasure of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of the life that really is life. This whole discussion is not about is this wrong? It's about, is it hurting us? That's the discussion. And when we put our money to use in ways that help, even if at first it's just to get out of debt, when we do that, we can reach out we can help other people, and we can get a hold of a life that really is life. It's not existing, it's living. So I'm just going to close. We are all richer than the majority of the world's population. You know, if you have a place to sleep and some money in your pocket and you're able to eat regularly right there, we're richer than most of the world's population. It is not sinful to have money. It is having money doesn't separate us from God. Loving money separates us from God. And it's easy to build wealth when you have no debt. So many things to do, so many exciting things to be involved with. The one family that my pastor friends talked about, they got out of debt, and about a year later, one of the girls that went to the private school with their daughter, her dad died, and her now single mom was not going to be able to afford tuition. So this girl was going to experience the loss of her dad and then the loss of all her friends. And this family, because they had done the hard work of getting out of debt, were able to pay her tuition for the year in full. How do you think that felt? Yeah. Coolest thing about being out of debt is you can give when you feel led to. In the church, but all over the place. And all the stuff in the world cannot beat the feeling that comes from helping someone. It's what we're here to do, to help each other, to hold each other up, and to remember that we're all family. All of us in this world. Amen.